Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and author of the newly released at #1, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. Get a copy for yourself. We're talking, as we do this time each month, with Joe Newby, author of Banned, How Facebook Enables Islamic Jihad, and also the manager of Conservative Firing Line, a blog dedicated to being exactly that, a conservative firing line. Joe has been in the blogosphere for many years and has been someone willing to stick his neck out on the issues that he feels America needs to be right about.
That's right.
Not left about. All right, Joe Newby, welcome to the Joe Newby Hour.
Good morning, Eric. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, my friend. So I take a look at my lead sheet on all of Joe Newby's recent pieces, and lo and behold, here we find that you're talking about Alabama.
Oh, yes.
Talk to
Absolutely.
me. What's the latest?
Well, I tell you what, it looks like as of this weekend, Judge Roy Moore was holding a commanding lead over Democrat Doug Jones. This despite everything that the Rhino establishment, the Mitch McConnells, and the mainstream media, the Washington Post, and of course Gloria Allred. There's a sterling reference for you. Despite everything they've tried to do, Judge Roy Moore is still out ahead. They even have a write-in candidate to go against Judge Moore, just like they tried with Donald Trump with Evan McMullin, who, by the way, is now derided as Evan McMuffin. But anyway, that being said, I would like to take this opportunity, Eric, if I could, to announce, since I'm the one of the many administrators of the largest Tea Party group on Facebook, now with over 97,000 followers, that we are hosting a Judge Roy Moore Day on Saturday, December. Saturday, or what is that? Sunday. I'm sorry, Sunday, December 10th.
Right.
And the purpose of that, of course, is to promote Judge Roy Moore. And so we will be accepting and approving all posts that are, favorable to the judge. And also, if somebody wants to post up an article or a meme or a cartoon that takes a shot at Doug Jones, we will also approve that. And we're going to be doing that from, I believe it's 2 to 11 p.m. or 11 to 2 p.m. Anyway, we have an event up there on the group. There's an article, one of my contributors, a fellow by the name of Mike Michaels, who owns and runs that group and got it kicked off. He's done an excellent job with it. He's got an article there about that. So if anybody wants to participate in that, we would love to have you. Because I definitely want to see Judge Moore win this election and defeat not only Doug Jones and the disastrous, dangerous agenda that he represents, which of course is open borders, pro-abortion, everything that the Democrats are all about. That's what he's all about. And we certainly don't want him in office to help out, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and that crowd. So we want to see Judge Roy Moore win. And yes, you're absolutely right. We have been doing at the Conservative Firing Line, we've been doing a number of posts about Judge Roy Moore. One of the things that I find interesting is this yearbook that Gloria Allred and one of her clients, Beverly Young Nelson, put forward as quote-unquote evidence that Judge Roy Moore did something back in 1977 where they are claiming that he signed this yearbook, and that is supposed to be proof that he engaged in sexual misconduct with Miss Nelson as a young girl. But what we have found, Judge Moore and his team have actually gone out and they pulled up some evidence. You know, testimony from eyewitnesses and people who worked at this place where Miss Nelson claimed to have worked, and it just completely shredded her allegations up one side and down the other. Judge Moore has called upon Gloria Allred to release this yearbook for forensic analysis, and she has yet to do so, and probably with very good reason, because of forensic analysis. I mean, you can look at the yearbook, this signature on the yearbook, Eric, and you can see that it's totally fake. For one thing, there's these initials DA after his name in that yearbook. Apparently, they're trying to put across the idea that at the time Judge Moore was a district attorney. Well, he wasn't. He was a deputy district attorney. And it turns out that those initials, DA, happened to have been one of his, the initials of one of his staffers who would sometimes initial after his name. So, I mean, this whole thing has been cooked up from the get-go. Every time we turn around, we find, one piece of information or another that takes down the so-called evidence that has been put up against Moore. And, from my position, looking at it from an outsider, this smells to me of something horrific. It's what was it? Justice Thomas called it a high-tech lynching.
Right.
And that's what I referred to it as. I did a post where I called this a high-tech, lowbrow lynching of Judge Roy Moore. And I think, what's even better is a poll that was released that showed that the vast majority of Republicans do not believe, or in Alabama anyway, do not believe these allegations, and about 90-some% of the Republicans who don't believe these allegations think that this was all cooked up by the media and by the Democrat Party. And I tend to agree with that 100%.
Well, I do as well. Larger picture, congressional slush fund over 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
Covering up for sexual misconduct claims against the government. And right. The American public is completely unaware that the piece that I wrote, which you published on conservativefiringline.com, my shock and awe piece about the
yes.
casting couch, we have a casting couch in Washington.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And this stuff has been going on for decades, Eric, decades.
Where is the outrage, and where is the, where is the FOIA filing? Mm-hmm. Where is the identification of naming the names of these sex offenders?
Right.
And where is the legislation being presented to say that if you are, like in a company, like in a police station, if there's an outstanding accusation against you, we ask for your shield, we ask for your weapon, and we put you on suspension until such time as the allegation and investigation is resolved. Correct. Why are we not doing that? Why is there no legislation being passed or presented to take these predators out of the process?
Right, exactly. And you make a very good point, Eric. A lot of times these allegations are made, and there's agreements that are made, these backroom deal kind of things. And you're absolutely right. There needs to be legislation to out this. What is so maddening about this, Eric, is that a lot of this is taxpayer money. This is our money, the money that you and I put in to pay our taxes. A lot of that is coming out of taxpayer funds. Um, it's sickening, it's maddening, and you're right, it absolutely needs to stop. In some cases, I've read reports where they're talking about Harvey Weinstein kind of stuff. I mean, just disgusting stuff, and this is being done, perpetrated by people who profess to be working for the benefit of the American people. This isn't working for the benefit of the American people, in my view.
In your opinion, would you speculate that if the list were to come out, that the column of those leaning towards the left would be greater than the column of those leaning to the right?
I would. Although there are, some names, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see some Republican names on that list. But I tend to agree that I think probably the vast majority of those would be either liberal Democrats or people who simply lean to the left in general.
Is this just another metaphor for the amount of corruption that exists across Washington?
Absolutely, it is. Look, power corrupts, and as the saying goes, absolute power corrupts absolutely. These people in Washington, D.C., in my view, have come to the conclusion, and this is just my opinion, have apparently come to the conclusion that they can do no wrong, that they are somehow above the law, and if they have the right letter behind their name, why they can do whatever they want, say anything they want to, and do whatever to whomever they wish at any time, or any place, and get away with it scot-free. Look at what happened to Ted Kennedy. Honestly, if a Republican had left a young woman to drown in a car while he was, drunk, do you expect me to believe that that Republican would be allowed to remain in office? Good Lord, no. That Republican would be run out of town on a rail. You know it. I know it. The whole country knows it. But yet, he was allowed to remain in office. There's been some horrific stories come out about what he has done, had done. I don't want to get into the gory details, but there's stories about what he, apparently did with Senator Chris Dodd, with waitresses. This is absolutely mind-blowing, disgusting. How is it that we can allow these people to remain in office after this kind of behavior?
And that's the $1 million question, the $64 million question, is that where is the outrage and where is the response? Is there no legislation, and is it because too many? And there certainly should be absolutely no provision whatsoever for leniency or grandfathering or any kind of expiration date on this. If these charges were levied and you're an acting congressman, look, I didn't look like who is it? Al Franken.
Right.
Didn't think it was funny when he was on Saturday Night Live. Still don't think he's funny.
Neither did I. Yeah.
But here he is, and he has evidence brought before him, and he feels that it's just okay to apologize and then continue his attack on Donald Trump and the Trump administration. Why is this allowed?
Because there's a double standard, Eric. There's a double standard within the media. We're seeing this with Judge Roy Moore. Look at what the Washington Post did to Roy Moore. And they did it after they had endorsed his Democrat opponent. And as we have now learned, of course, they left a few details out of that particular story, details that, in my view, are quite key. So I think we have, and I've called it this quite often, a Democrat media complex, and that is On one hand, you've got the Democrat Party, and on the other hand, you have their propaganda arm, which most of us know as ABC, NBC, CBS, Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, on and on and on. So if there is an allegation against a Democrat, chances are these media outlets will either ignore them, downplay them, pretend they never happened, pretend they didn't exist, or they will excoriate the Republicans for daring to mention that this was done by a Democrat. And, oh, how racist are you? You must be some kind of white supremacist for thinking that John Conyers should be held to the same standard as, say, well, Roy Moore. And that's the way it is in today's political and media environment. That's the environment that they have created, and they've been getting away with this for year in and year out. And now I think the American people are waking up. Finally, they're beginning to wake up, and they are saying enough of this. It's time to put it to an end.
Well, we're so distracted with Wienergate and Moorgate and Conleygate and Frankengate. There's a lot of things going on around the world that are mighty concerning.
Absolutely.
The Soviet Union calling a meeting with Turkey and Iran. The president should be making an announcement between today and Wednesday in regards to future recognition of Jerusalem as the eternal capital of Israel. I believe that he is going to do something unprecedented, and that is recognize Jerusalem as a capital, but not sign the waiver requiring the movement immediately, and try to move the process along incrementally. Nevertheless, that will send a ripple through the region.
Yes, it will.
Israel has already fired missiles in Damascus on Iranian weapons.
Yep.
So things are escalating in the Middle East. We don't hear a word about it.
Right.
You have more coverage in the British prince saying, I want my son to determine who he wants to be, because if he wants to be a female, he could be in the line of the queen.
Right, right.
As a male, he can only be a duke. But if he decides he wants to be a woman, he can be the queen, or whatever convoluted, ridiculous this is. Is America become the Tommy of the album, the song written by The Who? That we've become the deaf, dumb, and blind kid, but we sure can play a mean pinball.
I love that analogy. It sure does seem that way, Eric. And I tell you, every time I go to Twitter, for example, it never ceases to amaze me. Just the level of stupidity that I'm seeing out there. People who, somebody was born a male, but today they think they're a female, and that's how they identify. And you'd better refer to them by their preferred pronoun, or else you can go to jail. That's in California now. I mean, and you know what, though, Eric? I look at all this, and you and I look at this, and I don't know about you. There's a part of me, I shake my head in disgust, but it just proves to me that, you know what, the Bible was right when it talks about these kinds of things taking place, and that there would be a time when stuff like this would be taking place. I'm not saying that Ezekiel 38 and 39 are right around the corner, but It could be, like you say, you have Russia and their ties to Iran. And you know what's interesting? I've listened to a number of studies on that chapter of Ezekiel, and what I find amazing is that the very countries mentioned in that chapter are some of the very same countries that are involved in these anti-Israeli activities. Russia, Turkey, Iran, on and on and on. It's fascinating. It really is. So yeah, I don't know about you, but I feel like, you know what, we've been given a heads up on a lot of this.
Michael Flynn,
Yes.
plea deal, pleads guilty to lying, and a tweet goes out, excuse me, not by Donald Trump, but on the official Donald Trump tweet,
Right.
which should make America aware that he doesn't always do his own tweets.
Exactly.
He's got a lawyer that tweets for him and then sends it to a social media group that approves or disapproves of going out under the POTUS tweet. And,
Right.
and in this case, the wording of it became a maelstrom of accusation that they had advanced knowledge and there's corruption and now obstruction of justice. We got a budget. We have a tax cut.
Right.
Tax reform.
Right.
We've got some real serious problems. We have B-52s, 50% of them cannot make it if there's a battle in the South Pacific.
Right.
These are problems I want to talk about.
Sure.
I don't want to talk about a tweet. I don't want to talk about Robert Mueller. James Comey is obvious. I sold myself to the highest bidder.
Yep.
I sold my soul to the company store.
Yep.
If there's people still debating the veracity of the Clintons, then they must live in a state where marijuana is legalized.
Close enough. Look, this whole thing is just totally out of whack. Look, it should tell us something that Robert Mueller's prime witness at this point is someone who is a known liar. I mean, let's just put it out there.
Right.
He's a known liar. Okay, and on top of that, you have the media. Brian Ross, for example, came out and made the claim that it was a candidate Trump who told Michael Flynn to contact the Russians. Well, no, he had to come out and correct that. So he got a 4-week unpaid vacation. Big whoop. This isn't the first time that Brian Ross has done something like this. It's not the first time ABC News has done something like this. But that's all it took for what most of us on my side of the aisle call the low information left to start jumping up and down. Look at what Joy Behar did. Look, they have been searching and searching and searching for over a year. They haven't found any evidence of collusion whatsoever. That tells me there is no collusion. There was no collusion between Trump and Russia. Just this morning, I saw on Twitter I don't know if you've heard of him. It's a website called the Palmer Report. And he puts out this tweet saying more about Russia smuggling money in through the NRA to give to Donald Trump and Republicans. And I'm like, what? So I did a Google search. Of course, there's nothing on it, and I looked at this guy's website and I'm like, what? I mean, you want to talk about fake news. I mean, this site was just, chock full of it. So, I did a post on that this morning. They're going to come up with, they're going to keep coming up with this kind of nonsense, Eric, until the day that Donald Trump is no longer in office, whether that be in, 2020 or, 2024. It's just never going to end. It really isn't.
Joe, in 1972, I was the vice president of the student body at Penn State University. the student government.
Right.
My running mate, the president, was a guy named Michael Shields, who was a white-collar criminal on parole from Ridgeview State Penitentiary, which is right there next to the university.
Right.
And he ran, he was there on parole, white-collar criminal, finishing his college education, and we ran on 2 platform items. Remember, this is the 70s.
Right.
Only, you know, people are talking about Vietnam, people are talking
Right.
about the black militants. You have the Black Panthers, Angela Davis,
Right.
Bobby Seals. You have Abby Freeman. You've got Abby Hoffman or
Right. Abby Hoffman.
Abby
Right.
Hoffman, and we're running on co-ed dorms and 24-hour visitation.
Right.
Now, I'll be 66 in a couple of weeks. If you
Well,
want to
happy
do it,
birthday.
thank you. If you want to do a background check on me and go back to, do I have any known associations with convicted felons? The answer would be yes.
Sure.
We were the poster children for president, vice president, USGA, student government,
Right.
and we were elected by an overwhelming population of a student body of 50,000, saying we want co-ed dorms, we want 24-hour visitation. What is this? The guys have to leave the girls' dorms at 7 o'clock. My goodness, this is 1972.
Right. Right.
We can't drink, but we can die in Vietnam, because this was Pennsylvania. Drinking age was 21, draft age was 18. Come on, let's get real. So that's what we ran on. So in this whole digging up people's pasts, that's like the worst thing that I ever did, because I was a known associate of a convicted felon.
Right.
Who happened to go on to graduate, to move to Florida, to open up a very successful, I believe, speech pathology practice, a wonderful member of society. But still, back in the day, he was a convicted, and still is, a convicted felon.
Right.
I don't know whether or not he's gotten pardoned, expunged, whatever. We haven't kept in touch. But you can go back 40, 50 years on anybody.
Yes, that's a fact.
And say that, 50 years ago, I reached over at a drive-in movie. And today, that would be blown out of proportion that, I say this jokingly, but media mogul accused of 1967 groping in a drive-in theater.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, look what they did to Mitt Romney. I mean, I think it was. I think it was the Washington Post. Come to think of it, actually came out and made I mean, they came up with this humongous article about how Mitt Romney cut the hair of a fellow student way back in, what was it, the 50s? I mean, long, about the time I was born, I think. And they made a huge, huge deal out of that, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
Right. That's how corrupt we were. We're talking to Joe Newby, provocateur of the Conservative Firing Line. You can find it at conservativefiringline.com. Edgy stuff, and I'm not talking about conspiracy edgy. I'm talking about exposing, just like you said, the left-wing conspiracy site claims Russia used the NRA to smuggle money to Donald Trump and the Republicans. Absurdities, but yet this is the kind of fodder that's out there. He's also the co-author of a book called Banned: How Facebook Enables Islamic Jihad. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we are going to continue in what's one of the most fun parts of our month, and that is the Joe Newby Hour. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and this is the Joe Newby Hour. And joining us from conservativefiringline.com, and author of the book Banned: How Facebook Enables Militant Islamic Jihad, Joe Newby.
Hey, good morning, Eric. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Joe, talk to me, if you will, about this House Senate budget. What's going to happen with this tax reform?
All right. Well, the House has passed a version. The Senate has passed a version. Basically, it means tax cuts for, well, the vast majority of us. It means corporate tax cuts. The two versions are somewhat different. So by the rules, the House and the Senate have to come together, and they have to reconcile the two and come up with a version that will actually get passed and signed by Donald Trump. The president has said he wants to see this on his desk by Christmas, last time I heard. So there is a possibility, maybe a bit slim, but there is a possibility that this could actually happen. Meanwhile, the left is going berserk, saying that letting people keep their own money is going to essentially destroy the planet and render the entire space-time continuum asunder. Of course, you and I both know that that's not true. Granted, there are some things within these packages that I'm not too thrilled with, and hopefully these things will get ironed out in a reconciliation. I do have concerns that homeowners will lose their mortgage interest deduction as one of the planks of this plan.
So is this a quid pro quo? Is this we're going to increase the standard deduction by an amount which is incorporating in, we're not really taking it away, we're merging it into a standard deduction. You're still getting the net benefit. It's just not called that. It's included in it.
And, that very well could be. The problem is, at this point, it's almost impossible to make any kind of determination about any of this because, again, we have two competing versions of this tax plan. And so the House and the Senate have to come together and they have to make this happen. And they have to come up with, something that both chambers of Congress can agree to. Now, the Democrats have made it clear they have no desire to work with Republicans on this. Donald Trump had a meeting and they wanted to try to get some kind of, something worked out, ironed out. Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi both said, no, to heck with this. And they decided they weren't going to show up. So Donald Trump, in typical Donald Trump fashion, I gotta love this, they went ahead and had a meeting, but they had two empty chairs.
Right.
So I kind of like that. But what disturbs me, though, and there's another part of this whole plan, I think we talked about it the last time we got together, was this idea that there would be an additional amount tacked on to those who make more than $1 million a year to make up for the fact that the first, 15,000 or 50,000 or whatever it was not going to be taxed. So what comes out of this agreement is going to be hard to say. It's impossible at this point, I think, to predict. Who knows what the two sides will come together and hash out. But it's better than what we've got now. I'll put it that way. It's a lot better than what we've got now, although it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, if it were up to me, my feeling is that look, God only wants 10%. But the federal government wants to have 2 or 3 times, what God asked for. So, that's just me. It's been proven time and again, Eric. John F. Kennedy proved it. Ronald Reagan proved it. Every time tax rates are cut across the board, revenues to the federal government increase substantially.
Right.
And yet, you have people in Congress, liberals and Democrats, who want to ignore and deny history and claim that's not the case, that you're a white nationalist if you want to keep your own money. I mean, this is a kind of rhetoric that they're using. It's the same old class warfare, um, and it hasn't worked before, and I'm hoping it won't happen this time. I tell you one thing I was surprised, though, Eric, is I'm surprised that John McCain actually voted for this bill. There was only one Republican who voted against it, and it doesn't surprise me that she voted against it. But I was actually surprised, and pleasantly so, to see that John McCain actually voted for this bill.
In the inner circles that I travel in, I've been told that the two parties will come together to pass tax reform if a DACA provision is added to it. They're willing to accept the immediate 20% reduction of corporate tax. They're willing to accept the lower levels of tax rates. They're willing to make it immediately effective, not incremental, and they're willing to increase home mortgage deduction up to a point, so that if your $12,000 or $24,000 doesn't cover it, they're still giving you an extra window to say you can take up to this additional amount if you're in one of those states. I still think it's taxation upon taxation.
It is.
Because you're taxing taxes. However, that's something that becomes a Supreme Court issue as to, and that will have to be taken up. But the people that I've talked to on both sides of the aisle have indicated that DACA is being held out, and that in the 11th hour that it's going to be pulled back in, and what's going to happen is that there'll be an amnesty provision that says, if you're here now, you can stay.
I think if Republicans do that, it would be very much to their detriment. Amnesty, I don't care what set of initials you want to give it. That's what this is. It's amnesty. And in my view, it should have absolutely nothing to do with the tax bill. Republicans need to stand up and stay strong and present a clean tax bill, a clean funding bill, without any of this, DACA or any of this other nonsense thrown in. Now, if they want to tell Democrats, look, we'll talk about DACA, maybe later on down the road, we'll sit down, we'll discuss it, but this thing needs to be a clean tax bill. Adding in DACA, in my view, would be a poison pill, because then they're going to put Donald Trump in a position of having to possibly veto the tax cut over DACA. Or, either way, it wouldn't look good. It wouldn't work for Donald Trump, because he'll either have to, veto the bill over DACA, and thereby deny us the tax cuts that he promised and deny him a legislative victory, or if he signs it, then he's in a position where he can be accused of reneging on his promise to end the DACA program.
And that may be the quid pro quo, is that we are going to say, if you're here under DACA, all right, you're going to go through a 2 to 5 year INS program, path to citizenship. not really
Right.
amnesty, it's path to citizenship.
Right.
You're going to have a clean record. You're going to have employment. You're going to have to pay taxes. You're going to have to do all these things. When we're stopping it now, there are no
Right.
future benefits.
Right.
We know that that's something that is supported because restriction on immigration and non-recognition of DACA of the Dreamer Act, it puts an end to the Dreamer Act, and that
Right.
that fulfills a campaign promise.
Mhm.
Then you come right behind that with a very strong immigration bill. If you grant amnesty to all these people, you're granting amnesty to 9 million Democratic voters. So
Exactly.
you're adding to the coffers of the Democratic Party. Although that doesn't really matter because they're pretty inefficient, and these certainly aren't the ones who are going to be leading the rallies. But for the well-crafted reform package, and unfortunately, this tax reform package does address and includes Obamacare.
Right.
It has to include the holdout, the Schumer-Pelosi holdout of saying something about DACA. And I
Right.
think that if they say something like, we're going to put in this provision, first of all, you have to be a taxpayer.
Right.
Means you have to register. If you're not registered, you have to register. And you have to come under this tax reform law. We're
Right.
going to give you this path to citizenship, and if you follow it, okay, and it's going to be the same kind of vetting, but it's going to be internal vetting, not external vetting. We're not using other agencies. We're using in-house Homeland Security. All right, if you go join a gang, you go get yourself in trouble, you lose your job,
You're out of here.
you're out of here. You've lost. You're now just an illegal, undocumented alien. So,
What concerns me about all of this, of course, Eric, is this. I see shades of no new taxes. Read my lips, no new taxes. I see that written all over this. I think if something like that is put in, and if Donald Trump accepts it in order to have a legislative victory and get tax cuts pushed through, that the Democrats will come back in 2020 and say, look, see there, Donald Trump reneged. He promised X, Y, and Z, and he didn't deliver. That is my main concern. That's why I think Republicans have got to stop this nonsense, quite frankly, of throwing in all kinds of extras into major legislation like this and say, no, here's the deal. Today we're talking tax reform. Today we're talking the budget. If you want to talk about DACA tomorrow, fine, but that's not before us today. And I think, Republicans have the majority, and it's time for them to start acting like a majority and governing like a majority and get out of this fetal position that they're constantly in and tell the Democrats no.
so
You want to talk about DACA? Fine. We'll do that tomorrow, but let's get this bill through first. Let's do this for the American people, and then we will debate the DACA tomorrow.
Okay, the process at this point is there now is a joint committee, representatives of the House of Representatives, representatives of the Senate, who are coming together to iron out a joint proposal, an agreed upon document.
Right.
Does this now get presented to a vote, to a joint session of Congress?
I don't know about a joint session, but it still has to go through, as I understand it, it still has to go through both houses. I mean, they still have to approve it, and then it still has to go up to, to the president for signature.
Right. So the House has approved one bill, the Senate's approved another bill. They have to come up with a new bill and then take those bills back respectively to the House and respectively to the Senate.
As I understand it, now, unless if there's some parliamentary trick, where they can get around that, then fine, whatever it takes. But as I understand it,
if Roy Moore is elected on December the 12th,
right,
and is inaugurated right away, seated right
sworn
away,
in, yeah,
then he becomes a vote, because
absolutely.
the vote is scheduled to come before Christmas in time to be signed for Christmas.
Right.
This becomes possibly the swing vote.
Absolutely.
It not only becomes the most important senatorial race in the country, so wildly contested, that Doug Jones, who is in favor of full-term abortion.
Right. Which, by the way, PolitiFact actually came out and said that there is no such thing.
Well, there is, because a man named Kermit Gosnell,
right,
ran a clinic in Philadelphia.
And he's not the only one.
Right, was doing full-term abortions, meant
Absolutely.
He was delivering live babies and taking a scalpel and severing their spinal cord and calling that full-term abortion. And in fact, it was murder. And let's call it what it is. I wrote one of the shortest op-eds ever. It said, "I will gladly lay down my gun when abortion doctors lay down their scalpels."
I hear you. I hear you. The only thing that I would say to that is that your gun and my gun is protected by the Constitution.
Correct.
And that abortion and that doctor's scalpel isn't. Despite what Roe v. Wade says, it really isn't. But I hear you. I mean, I understand the sentiment. I really do.
Yeah, I retweeted today that the leading cause of death in America is abortion. The leading cause of death in America last year was abortion. It's not heart disease. Abortion's number 1, guns number 10. Why are we focusing on number 10 when we could fix number 1? And,
I've heard it said too that the most dangerous place for a black child is in the womb today, thanks to Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry.
Right. I believe it is a racial plot to control the African American population. The same way in my book, The Codist, I used research material out of Africa, out of the CDC, that talked about the fact that AIDS, SARS, sickle cell anemia, many of those things were designed and developed in laboratories, and the purpose behind it was for population control.
Right. And you only had to look back to Margaret Sanger's own words, talking about, blacks and abortion. I mean, her own words made it clear that she was targeting the black population.
No question. No question. It brings up our final topic for the day, and I'm going to talk about the race war and get some closing comments. I hate racism. I wasn't born a racist. No one I know was born a racist.
Right.
And I continue to look at both sides of the house and say to them, if you'll just stop hyphenating your name, I'll stop having to call you by a racial identification. I will stop having to recognize your race first before your humanity.
Well, I agree with you 100%, Eric, and I'll let me share this with you and our audience. Growing up, kind of like you, you're a couple of years ahead of me, but I grew up, and I'm sure you did too, at a time when we had things like segregated water fountains, segregated bathrooms. You had,
Absolutely.
lunch counters for blacks and lunch counters for whites. I remember those as a child. And, the N word was very popular. Well, I grew up in a house with a family who could trace their roots back to an individual who was hung by the KKK for cutting down a black person who was hung by the KKK. And this is what my family grew up with. And my grandfather taught me at a very, very early age um, that, we don't use the N word. And this was at a time when everybody used the N word everywhere. That was a word that was not permitted in our house, period. And and he taught me. My grandfather taught me that long before Martin Luther King said it, in Washington D.C., my grandfather taught me to judge a person by the way they acted. Like Martin Luther King said, by the content of their character and not the color of their skin.
Right.
Today, though, Eric, that has been turned upside down on its head, and it's being done. And I hate to say this, it's being not being done by the white people at all. It's being done by um, some of those, and some of those in the Black Lives Matter movement, and people who are allied with them. There was this editorial in a college paper in Texas, and you're probably aware of this, where this guy comes out and says, that white DNA is an abomination, and and actually called for white death. Well, let's put that into what he's really talking about: white genocide of an entire race of people because of the color of their skin.
Right.
And I see this kind of rhetoric from the Black Lives Matter crowd. I see this kind of rhetoric from white liberals, white progressives, who, for whatever reason, can't get it through their heads that what they're really talking about is genocide, and it's every bit as racist as they claim you and I are. I remember, here not that long ago, there was a principal over in Portland, up in my neck of the woods, not too far from here, relatively speaking, who said that she could find racism in a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So where's the racism really coming from? This is, again, we need to get back to what Dr. Martin Luther King talked about: judging people by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin.
Amen. Great closing words for this edition of the Joe Newby Hour, right here on Igniting a Nations Network, INBN, and our program Revealing the Truth. We encourage you to visit us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and on WND-TV. Joe Newby, thank you so much for hosting the Joe Newby Hour. We're going to be with you again in January, but not on our regular date. We're going to move you to the 11th because we would not want to miss out on spending. We'd love to spend New Year's Day with you, but we know you have other plans. You, your wife, and your parrot will be doing something else.
Absolutely.
So we're going to have you back here on January the 11th at 12 o'clock for the Joe Newby Hour, special edition, and right around the State of the Union address. So it'll be kind of interesting to see what's taken place over the last 30 days. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year to you and your family. Thank you for being such a good personal friend, a good professional friend, and a co-laborer in the kingdom of heaven. Joe Newby, thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you, Eric, and God bless you as well.
Thank you. And that brings to an end our live broadcasting day, but that doesn't mean we go off the air. We'll be rebroadcasting these episodes all day long until tomorrow, when we will bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth. Until we see you right back here in our studio here in Birmingham, Alabama, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time. We bid you shalom.